Alright guys, it's Jerningham here. Lots of people are protesting on the M6 and walking down the motorway. I've never seen anything like it. People have knocked over the statues, what was up against the thing in Bristol, and said it was apparently racist against black people, the statue. But the thing is, we all look at things in a different light and a different thing in this world. I'm going to show you this video and let you guys and girls figure it out for yourselves what you think about this video. You may disagree with the video, you may not. If you've got people that are white and people that are black, people are colours at the end of the day, and we're all different colours at the end of the day. We're still human beings, we all bleed the same, and we all think the same, or in different ways. But what I'm going to be showing you in this video, you may like it, you may find it offensive, the video, you may not like it, you may think it's silly. It's understandable, we're all different. I'm going to play the video and see what you guys think.
In further anti-racism protests across Britain today, with the statue of a 17th century slave trader pulled down in Bristol. The monument to Edward Colston, which had stood in the city centre for more than a century, was toppled and pushed into the river. The latest demonstrations came 13 days after the killing of George Floyd by US police, and despite the government here urging people not to take part because of the risk of catching or spreading coronavirus. Tonight, Boris Johnson defended the right to protest peacefully, but said the weekend's demonstrations had been subverted by thuggery. From Bristol, John Kay sent us this report.
There you go, the statue goes down, see?
300 years after his death, Edward Colston's fall from grace.
Edward Colston's fall from grace statue. Some people may think that's disrespectful for knocking a statue down.
For centuries, he took pride of place in Bristol, celebrated as a merchant, politician and philanthropist. Now reviled for his part in the slave trade.
That statue represents years of oppression, it represents years of hurt, and just a lot of emotion and hatred.
They may put the statue back up there.
That's it, we've internalized for years, and that coming down today hopefully signifies change. Hopefully we've sent a message not just to everyone in the UK or the USA, worldwide.
Cast in bronze, now daubed with graffiti, one of Bristol's most famous sons. Some protesters knelt on his neck, a reference to the death of George Floyd across the Atlantic. This had begun as a Black Lives Matter demonstration, but it ended in the historic docks where Colston's ships once sailed. Jasmine is a trainee teacher.
What do you say to somebody who lives in Bristol who's horrified by the fact that this is gone?
People might say it's vandalism, but black people have to walk these streets. Black slaves built Bristol. We have to walk these streets and see that statue of Colston's every day. That's what it means. That statue is a kick in the face to all black people.
There has been a growing campaign in recent years to remove Colston's name from buildings across the city, but many feel destroying the statue was the wrong way to do it. Tonight was a small counter-protest, claiming local history had been trashed.
Sheer vandalism and disorder completely is unacceptable, and it's right actually the police follow up on that and make sure that justice is undertaken with those individuals that are responsible for such disorderly and lawless behaviour.
Avon and Somerset police say they deliberately took a low-key approach to the whole protest due to sensitivities, safety and social distancing.
Some people will look at this and think, hang on a minute, you should have intervened, you should have stepped in, you should have at least challenged the behaviour that was happening.
But this was a very difficult policing operation. There's a lot of context that sits around it, and I believe we did the right thing.
No regrets?
No regrets.
This evening, people are coming down here, laying placards, and many of them just standing, looking in disbelief at what has happened here. That in one afternoon, this city has challenged its history and changed its landscape. John Kay, BBC News, Bristol.
Elsewhere, protests took place in several parts of the country, with thousands gathering at the US Embassy in London. A small number remained near Downing Street into this evening, and they have just been ordered to disperse by police. Chichi Zundu reports. Another day where thousands have marched peacefully against racism. In London, the focus was the US Embassy.
I'm from Oakland, California, so I grew up with a lot of police violence around me, and it's something I don't want my son to experience in his life. You know, so that's one of the reasons why I'm in this country, because it is less violent, but there's still racism, so we have to fight it. So therefore, we're here today.
This is my deep passion, and I'm here because I believe that black people deserve the same chance as everybody else.
We need to tackle racism, and we've never really dealt with it in this country and many countries, and there comes a time when we all have to speak up.
In Glasgow, protesting safely during the pandemic was a concern for organisers.
I think the turnout is amazing, it's really inspiring, and it's amazing to see people already take the social distancing measures seriously and doing the best they can to stay safe today.
In Wrexham, people also protested mindful of the 2-metre social distancing.
So this is what happens in the M6.
Which was partially closed for 1 hour after protesters blocked the roads. But the day has been marred by a minority. 27 police officers have been injured during this week's demonstrations, but that number is likely to rise after this evening. Bottles, traffic cones and other objects were thrown at officers as they tried to clear protesters out of Whitehall.
It's been a week of protests across the UK, and thousands have taken to the streets to have their voices heard. But where does this go, and what happens next? Gigi Zindu, BBC News.
The young organisers of today's protests have told the BBC that they are the generation to bring about real change. In the past fortnight, the Black Lives Matter hashtag has been used 40 million times on social media, and many people have shared and listened to experiences of racism. Our community affairs correspondent Rihanna Croxford reports.
We're all black and we need to stand together. Don't want my children to have to do the same thing that I'm doing right now.
We, the bereaved families that are left behind, are the voices of the cemetery.
They are 4 decades apart, united by the same battle against racism. Natasha is 21 and just a student. But today, she and her friend Ima have brought together thousands of people across the UK to protest over the death of African-American George Floyd.
You can't really tell the oppressed how to feel because we're the ones who are experiencing it. Just because people aren't like out on the street like pointing at me and calling me the N-word doesn't mean that like racism isn't still alive.
What would you say to people who criticise the lack of social distancing at these protests?
We have a health pandemic happening right now. I don't want people to be affected, but at the same time, we have another pandemic, a pandemic of black people being killed and shot every single day, and no one's talking about it, no one's fighting about it. So I think that we need to fight both of these pandemics.
This isn't the first time people in the UK have taken to the streets to protest. The Brixton riots in 1995, the London riots in 2011, and the protests today have all been triggered by the deaths of black people killed by the police or in police custody. These are the faces of some of the people who have died. An uncomfortable history, some say it's now time for the nation to confront.
It's sunk in and then it doesn't sink in, and then it's sunk in and then
Stephanie Lightfoot Bennett is still fighting for justice for her brother Leon, who died in police custody in 1992. His case was reopened in November last year.
When Leon died, it was nothing. You know, and now we have this movement where any death is now highlighted. And students, I love students. They are the future, they are the eyes, and they are the ones that will help shut the door. Not completely, but shut the door on racism.
As yet another generation take to the streets, these organisers say they won't stop till those in power start to listen. Rihanna Croxford, BBC News.
The England and Manchester City footballer Raheem Sterling has tonight told the BBC he has given his support to the protesters, calling for efforts to end injustice. He was speaking to Emily Maitlis in an interview which will run in full on Newsnight tomorrow.
The only, disease right now is the racism that we're fighting. I think this right now, this is the most important thing at this moment in time because, this is something that's been happening for years and years. And just like the pandemic, we want to find a solution to stop it.
Raheem Sterling. Well, let's turn to our home editor, Mark Easton, who's here in the studio. What are you taking away from these series of protests in this country, Mark?
Why are people so frustrated and so angry in Britain in the 21st century? Angry enough to take to the streets in the middle of a deadly pandemic, angry enough to risk arrest, angry enough in some cases to commit acts of criminal damage. George Floyd died thousands of miles away in Minneapolis, and yet his death, I think, feels deeply personal to many people from the black and minority ethnic communities in this country, because it's a reminder of the prejudice and the unfair privilege which still exists here, of the pain of racism, the injustice of profound racial inequalities that exist in this country today. Of course, there will be very real questions about the wisdom of mass protests in the middle of a virus, and indeed about the violent behaviour of a few protesters, the thuggery that the Prime Minister has talked about tonight. But as Britain tries to identify what our new normal society is going to look like after this virus, perhaps we should try and think, how are we going to respond to the obviously deep unhappiness, frustration and anger that we've seen on our streets over the last few days?
Mark, thank you very much. Well, let's go live now to Washington. Tomorrow it will be 2 weeks since George Floyd was killed by police in the US state of Minnesota, and our North America correspondent Aleem Maqbool is at the White House now. What is the latest there, Aleem, on the aftermath of George Floyd's death, the response and the handling from the administration?
Yeah, well, things have been extremely peaceful over recent days. You can barely see security forces visible here too. I mean, there was a sense that they were a bit of a red rag to a bull, particularly National Guard troops on the streets for a lot of the protesters. We now hear that they won't be used going forward, but still large numbers of people coming here to the White House and to protest around the country. And while the overarching cause, of course, Black Lives Matter against institutional racism and brutality by the police, is the same everywhere, there are a lot of local causes being fought for as well, like in Colorado. People are fighting for justice for a particular family of an African American who was killed by local police there. And in other places, like in Virginia, there have been protests calling for Confederate statues to be removed. And in some cases, protesters have taken matters into their own hands, removing memorials to those who defended slavery or even fought to keep slavery. But in other cases, as with the authorities in Virginia, they've agreed to the demands of the protesters to remove more statues. So while that is still the case, while there are still tangible demands that can be met around the country, I think we're going to see these protests continue beyond the memorial to George Floyd tomorrow in Texas and beyond his funeral on Tuesday as well.
Aleem Maqbool in Washington, thank you.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed that video, guys. Give it a like, give it a comment, share it with your friends, and tell me what you think about this. See you next video. Peace. See you later. Peace.